rug out from under millions of people. Each year of raising the retirement age is a 6.5% cut in benefits that are already very modest. The average retiree has only $14,000 a year in Social Security benefits, which is less than the minimum wage. The program's 75-year funding gap is less than 2% of payroll. It should be and can be closed with revenue increases from upper income earners, more and more of whose income is escaping taxation, while the average worker, as you've said, pays Social Security tax on 100% of his or her wages. Polls show that this is the solution that Americans want. 83% of Americans in a Rockefeller Foundation poll said that they would like to see taxes raised on the upper income people who are not paying on their full share right now. And good policy actually happens to be good politics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross. And now we'll turn to Ms. Miller. Ms. Miller, I also read your testimony last night, and it's very profound. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Chairman Harken and Senator Sanders and the rest of this committee for inviting me to speak today on this important issue. Again, my name is Shireen. To this committee for inviting me to speak today on this important issue. Again, my name is Shireen Miller, and I am the mother of two and proud grandma. Personal care assistant in Falls Church, Virginia, and I'm a member of the SEIU Local 5. I started working when I was 17 years old. You name it, I've done it. I've pumped gas, managed a convenience store, I've cooked pizzas, worked in a nursing home. I'm used to living hand to mouth, doing what I have to do to pay the bills. Like most Americans, I'm worried about my retirement. I've worked hard all my life, but I have no pension. I've not been able to save enough money, and Social Security alone won't be enough to sustain me. As a personal care assistant, I make $12 an hour and receive no health care benefits, no retirement benefits, no sick time or vacation time. I care for a client, Marissa, in her mid-20s with spastic cerebral palsy. Personal care is not babysitting. My job includes bathing Marissa, cooking for Marissa, feeding her, helping her use the bathroom, assisting her with schoolwork for college, and anything else she cannot do by herself. I'd like to say that I am her hands since she can't use her own. I love Marissa. This is the most rewarding job I've ever had. Without the services I provide, she would not be able to live a full and productive life. I cannot do personal care forever. Marissa can move herself in a power chair, but I have to lift her into the bed, I have to lift her into the tub, and if we want to go somewhere, I have to lift her into the car. It becomes harder each year. I think about the day when I permanently damaged my back or knees trying to lift her. After all, how many of you could imagine your grandmothers carrying a person around? Other career options will not be very attractive, as there's not a lot of open doors for 65-year-olds with a high school education. So I have no planned retirement date. I'll keep on working until my body gives out. So if continuing working isn't an option, what do I have to fall back on for retirement? $12 an hour doesn't leave much room for savings. My entire paycheck goes to pay my mortgage, keep the electricity on, putting gas in my car, and buying groceries. I have approximately $28,000 left in a 401k from a previous job, and it's half as what it was before the market that crashed in 2008. I'm no expert in investing, but I do know that our retirement should not be left to the ups and downs of Wall Street. Thankfully, I know Social Security will be there for me. If I retire at the full retirement age, I'll receive at least $17,000 a year, and it will not be subject to the swings of the market. But still not enough. I make approximately $35,000 a year, and I'm barely making ends meet. And if there's an emergency, like necessary dental or car repairs, I have to borrow from my 401k. I have no idea how I can live off of $17,000 a year, and that's if my back holds up for another 20 years. And if the retirement age is raised to 70, as some are proposing, I would lose another 5% of my pay if I chose to retire at the current retirement rate. We need to act to strengthen Social Security. Cutting Social Security or raising the retirement age is not an option, but we need to do more. Members of this committee and every lawmaker in Washington needs to commit to finding solutions that allow Americans who spend a lifetime of hard work driving their bodies to the limit to retire with dignity, to be able to pay their bills and spend time with their grandchildren. I hope we can meet this challenge. Thank you again for letting me share my story.
Well, thank you, Ms. Miller, for putting it in concrete human terms.
Thank you.
A lot of times, I mean, I'm not disparaging our experts who are here. They do incredibly important work, too, in informing us as to what is happening. But I think too often we just don't get down to the real people and what's happening out there. As I said, we keep talking about it around here about tax breaks for $250 and above or $1 million and above, and as if that's the middle class of America. You're the middle class of America. Most Americans are making what you make, $35,000, $40,000, $45,000, $50,000, $55,000 a year. That's the middle class of America. And they are being squeezed like they've never been squeezed before. And on top of that, they're losing their retirements. And so is it any surprise that the vast middle class of America is pretty upset with what we're doing? Doesn't come as any surprise to me. But thank you very much for being here and telling us your story. And I have a couple of questions for you, too. But I wanted to ask Mr. Vanderheet. In the old days, again, many people got their defined benefit pension through their employers. They didn't have to sign up or choose which plan. It was just automatic. Now, retirement's gotten a lot more complicated. Workers with 401ks need to do research, figure out how much they need to set aside for retirement. That's their own choice, their own decision. Less than, at least my figures or what I've been informed is that less than half of the workers actually do the calculations. Only about 1/3 are getting professional advice. You note in your written testimony that when workers understand how much they need for a secure retirement, they generally increase their savings. In that regard, there have been proposals, including one from Senator Bingaman, to require 401k account balances to show a participant's projected income stream in retirement, not just the account balance. Do you think giving workers that kind of information would, number one, encourage retirement savings? And what if that were paired with an estimate of how much a person would need in retirement? In other words, here's how much you would need in retirement, and here's what your income stream would be. Do you think that might encourage people maybe to set aside a little bit more if they were able to?
Senator Harken, that's an excellent question, and I'm afraid my answer is going to be more complicated than a simple yes or no, if you don't mind. This is something we've studied for many, many years at the Employee Benefit Research Institute. We have a 2006 issue brief just trying to estimate what people actually do need to have a comfortable retirement. The problem I would see of trying to do something that's just a boilerplate regulation or legislation is that there are so many complications in trying to figure out what is an adequate retirement target. It depends on whether or not you have any sort of annuity. It depends on whether you have any sort of long-term care. It depends on a number of different things. And just to quickly emphasize one thing is that you can do all the simulation modeling you want and come out with here is the average value. You have to keep in mind that if you shoot for a target that's based on averages, you're in essence telling people one chance out of two you're not going to have sufficient money, either because you lived too long or because you had catastrophic health care costs or what have you. So if someone were trying to approach something like that, my professional opinion would be you can't just have a number. You absolutely have to have a range of numbers to try to guide them along to their particular comfort level, and you have to reflect their particular characteristics. I personally think it might be a bit misleading, more than a bit misleading, to just come out with any rule of thumb and try to apply it across the board?
That's really hard for people, for the average person, to sift through all those numbers, sift through all that and say, yeah, here's what I need. Look, I have a law degree. My wife has a law degree. We make good money. We're in the upper ranges there. So we went to think about our retirement and went to a retirement counselor, and she gave us all these things. I don't even understand it. I said, well, what do you think? What do you think is best for us? Well, here's what I think. Okay, fine, we'll do that. I got to believe that's what most people do. They can't understand all this gobbledygook, you know, the average worker out there. So they tend to take whatever is presented to them and suggested to them. So how do you get it in a form so that they really do understand? If you don't have, here's what your income stream can be, and here's how much you need. Here, based upon where you are now, assuming you, if you're disabled now, here's what you need. If you're not disabled, if you don't become disabled, here's what you need to project what you need, and here's your income stream. Then people would have a pretty good idea of that, wouldn't they?
If one were to simplify the target to a place where one could do ready comparisons between the projected annuity value coming from a defined contribution plan, plus their Social Security, plus their additional savings, plus if they had a defined benefit or a cash balance situation, and combine all that information together, again, one could come up with a relatively easy comparison. My extreme caution would be if you're going to develop that target based on nothing but average life expectancy, average investment experience, average health care costs in retirement, you are in essence dooming them to a 50% chance of running out of money in retirement. So if you're going to proceed down that route, one needs to be conservative in those assumptions.
Right.
One needs to realize life expectancy is going to be relevant only for 50% of the population. One needs to get a target that they will be able to focus on and have some degree of certainty that that would be sufficient for them.
Well, I'm trying to get a better handle on this, and also this whole shift to the 401ks. But the other thing I wanted to ask you was, well, I'll pursue that later because I wanted to ask. My time is out. I have a lot of questions for Ross and Ms. Miller, but I'll turn to Senator Sanders. We'll go back and forth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your excellent testimony. Mr. Eisenbright, let me briefly run through some economic history of the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, as a result of the greed and illegal behavior on Wall Street, this country has been plunged into a horrendous recession. Congress, in its wisdom, against my vote, decided to bail out Wall Street to the tune of $700 billion. Number two, despite growing income and wealth inequality in America, what we have done in recent years is lower taxes for the very rich. Warren Buffett, you know, Mr. Chairman, often comments that he, one of the richest people in the world, pays an effective tax rate lower than his secretary, effective tax rate. And right now, we have some of our colleagues who want to give $700 billion in tax breaks to the top 2%. And want to repeal the estate tax, which would provide $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 0.3%. And now, in the midst of all of that, we have folks like Pete Peterson of the Peterson Foundation. And you say in your remarks, you say, and I quote, "The Peterson Foundation and a host of other mostly well-off experts have managed to convince much of the media and many Washington policymakers that the way to save Social Security benefits is to cut them." End of quote. Would you want to comment on a billionaire who made his money in Wall Street now suggesting spending a huge sum of money to convince the American people that the way to save Social Security is to cut benefits?
Yes, there's so much to say about that.
And so little time.
You know, the average person, the secretary, Warren Buffett's secretary,